Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Dijamco. I'm going to go through this live stream a little bit differently today because I thought that I would tell my story again. It's been a while since I've told it, but I've been getting more questions on what kind of physician are you and what is an integrative physician? What is a cranial osteopath? What do you mean by multidimensional MD? And so I thought that I'd share my story and go through it in order so you can see the elements and aspects that inspired me and helped to direct the decisions I took in medicine and brought me to where I am today. So, as always, my mission is to really bring the intuitive aspects of health back to medicine in practical and tangible ways to help bring more peace, love, and joy into your everyday lives. And so we can access deeper healing and more efficient healing. And really, I'd love to normalize talking about difficult things that are the most important things in our lives. So if we can do that, then we will be so much more ahead in terms of health and healing. So I feel that's part of my passion. And how did this all start? So I am one of those people that grew up, as long as I remember, since I was 3 years old, I said, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. I'm sure my parents put me in one of those shirts that said, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. So my parents are physicians. My grandfather is a physician. So it goes back and has been in my blood. And uh, I can't remember a moment when I didn't want to be a physician. My family came from the Philippines. So my dad's family was in the Little Islands, or going back in the ancestors, and many of them were gardeners. They really worked with and tended to the land. So half of that group, or I don't know how many, but some of them stayed and tended to the land, and then a group went to the city and became physicians. So that was where my dad came from. Again, his dad was, my grandfather was a physician too. And so my parents met in medical school, and then they came over to the United States for their internship and residency. So I love this background because you see this combination of nature and then the science and medicine and healing, and really get to integrate it into one. So I feel that in me. I don't have the same green thumb that my dad did, my grandfather, but I feel it in different ways. I feel like I have a green thumb in a different way. So it's incorporating these holistic aspects. So anyway, my parents were intensivists. My dad was a nephrologist. He's already passed, but he worked with kidneys, hypertension, dialysis, and a lot of patients in intensive care unit because their kidneys are failing. So to work with dialysis with them. And then my mom was is an anesthesiologist, and so she worked with with surgeons and putting people under, helping them breathe in acute emergency situations where you have to help someone breathe suddenly. So they have such a different way that they practice, being much more that heroic kind of medicine. So there's an emergency, they dive in, they save your life. So I am in a very different setting. I'm in my own practice and not in the hospital setting. But let me go through a little bit more. So that's the background of my family, and in high school, gosh, I was just so fascinated by the philosophers and the transcendentalists and the authors, Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman. That was my favorite in English class. And then I also really loved physics. So especially when it started to get into quantum physics, which we barely touched on, but I loved reading about Einstein and his theory of relativity. And I loved how your awareness of things could affect things. So it's just that interaction with the world, with your life. And so I kind of carried those ideas along just in the background. Went through college, went through Harvard, majored in psychology at Harvard. So I always had an interest of this emotions and feeling, because I'm a feeler type. I'm very sensitive and I can feel things easily, but I also have a lot of interest in science and medicine as well. So kind of putting those two together. I went to medical school at Emory, and my first year at medical school, I had this great idea. I said, "Well, how about instead of comparing everything to the placebo effect, we study the placebo effect. It's that and figure out that innate capacity of the body to get better from within. And then we won't have to worry about the side effects." And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such common sense. And it would change medicine. I was thinking, we've got it all wrong. We could just flip the whole paradigm around. Like we got to work with the innate health of the body. We got to support that, and we got to figure out what that is and how we can support it. And because everything we were studying was like anti this, anti histamine, anti hypertensive, antibiotic, antiviral. So everything was anti. And I'm like, what about the nourishment? What about support? What about that healing from within? And so I brought this up with my group at the time, with the other medical students, my friends and colleagues, brilliant, really great people, and the attending. And I just got this look, and the attending just kind of tilted his head, and he was like, "Hmm, well, that's an interesting way of looking at it." And I thought, we're gonna have this great discussion, because it wasn't like a yes or no question. It was just like, wow, isn't this fascinating? We could do so much more in medicine. We could raise the bar of health. We could look at miracles, because a miracle is just something that we don't understand. And what if we tried to understand it? What if we studied it and had the same interest and curiosity in it as we did these other aspects of medicine? So, but he said, "Oh, well, that's an interesting way of looking at it." And then we just moved right along to everything else. And I remember my friends and my colleagues turning their heads to the attending physician. And I was like, why are they looking at him? This is not an answer that like one person would know. This is something that we would come from within us, and we'd have a discussion about it. But I, I mean, at the time I didn't know, but now I realize, I was like, oh, people didn't really have a framework to talk like that, to understand that. So they were looking at him for the answers. And since he really didn't understand what I was saying, then just moved right along to talking about other things. But that really made a deep impression on me, because I realized, I was like, gosh, maybe there's something different about the way I think. I don't really know why. I thought it was common sense, but it just made me quiet to lay low to kind of get through medical school, because I was like, that's the first year. And I felt really bad, because I thought I had this great idea, and I was looking at things that would really change and shift medicine in a really big way, and people weren't interested. And so it probably made me a little depressed about it, because I had came in with such an idealistic mindset, and I thought, it's not what I thought it was. It was just there were a lot of turf wars. There were a lot of politics. And I was like, no, I didn't want to go into politics. I wanted to go into healing. And then it's like, oh no, I went into it's political as anything else, and you can't really avoid that. But I was young and idealistic, and so it was sort of a downer to me to like to see the reality of the world. But I had these ideas. I kept them more in the background, since I realized people were really interested. And then my I think it was the beginning of my third year of medical school, I had a major experience that also like just changed the way I looked at things. Like I knew I wanted to do things differently. That's where it was like I was choosing more to do it differently, because we had just learned how to do this amazing history. So that's where you talk to a person, you get all their information, you take the details down. So when you're first learning as a student, you learn how to take a history that takes forever, and it's a really great ideal history. It's a really like holistic, like integrative history. But we're always told, "Oh, you'll never do that because you don't have time to do that." But we got to teach you how to do it like the really ideal way, right? So since we're medical students, I still got to do it the ideal way. So I had pages and pages of questions to ask this patient that was in the hospital, the urban hospital, and we had the whole attending group with me. So, I'm on the spot here. I'm the one asking the questions. All the students are watching me, and so is the attending. So I'm being very careful to be very thorough and asking every question I have on my list and writing down all the answers. So then we get to some very deep questions. And one of them was, have you ever been sexually abused? So this woman was in the hospital for pneumonia, but this was in my questions I had to ask her. And she said, yes. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was young, I was inexperienced, I didn't know anything. And the next question it said, have you ever told anyone? And she said, no. And I just wasn't I don't know what I was expecting. I didn't have an expectation, but then I looked at my list and it didn't give me any more direction. It just went on to another question unrelated to that, but it didn't say what to do if they said yes or no. And so I was like looking around at my friends and my colleagues with like pleading eyes, like, help me. And I looked at the attending, help me, like, silently, like, somebody, I don't know what to do. No one said a word. No one even reacted or responded. It sounds crazy and really cold now because things have changed a lot. It's been that was what I graduated in 2002, so that must have been like 1999. So it's been a while since then, and we wouldn't think people would respond like that. Maybe they still do, but I didn't know what to do, so I just moved on to my next question. I felt really bad because this woman had revealed something really impactful and deep in her life, and I hadn't responded to it. Actually, I responded by not responding, and that's even worse because it's like she didn't say anything. And, but I thought, okay, I have an ethics class later. I can ask them. They will tell me what to do because I really wanted to help her still. And I was like, okay, I still have time. So I went to the ethics class and we talked about it. And they said, oh, thank you so much, Arlene, for bringing this question up. This is a really great thing to talk about. So we talked and I was waiting. Okay, so what are we going to do? And we never got to that. They just talked about it was just all like theoretical. I was like, where's the practical advice? Like the recommendations. I don't even know what to tell her. And I guess I didn't know how to even ask these direct questions to get concrete answers from the class. And so, anyway, I left really disappointed and mad. It was really, I mean, I was really mad. Um, I'm trying to watch my language, so I don't know who's watching. So, I I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to be that kind of physician because we had done her more harm than good. She had revealed to us something that was traumatic, and by not responding, we had asked her to divulge this information and then told her with our silence that it didn't matter. She didn't matter. We didn't even care that this happened to her. We just wanted to know, but we don't even care of what her answer was. And I was like, if they don't know how to deal with stress and trauma, then I am going to figure it out. And so it was still early and I mean, I was still like middle of medical school, so I didn't know how that was going to unfold, but I decided I was not going to be that kind of physician. And so that really shifted the way I started to look at things. And if I went back now, even without knowing anything or having any training of like how to deal with that, I know that you can always approach with love and presence, to just pause and say, thank you for sharing that with me. I know that was really difficult, or say whatever comes to you. Maybe you don't know what to do. So you could say, I'm not sure what to do, but I'm going to figure it out. And if you would like help, I will figure out how you can get help. So um, with there's so much. What is that? Hey, Anne, I didn't know you're here. So can you re-mention what it is that the woman said for us latecomers? Okay, so I'm telling the story of, and this will be in the recording too, of my first time I did a thorough interview in the hospital. So this was at Grady in the Urban Hospital in Atlanta, and a woman was there with pneumonia. And in the history, I asked, have you ever been sexually abused? And she said yes. And then the next question was, have you ever told anyone? And she said no. And there were no other questions or anything guiding me as to respond to that, nor did the whole group that I was with or the attending I was with say anything. And so you can go back in the recording, I said a little bit more about that. But so this was a really influenced me as a young physician in training. And I decided it was never going to be like that. And on top of that, this woman is in the hospital. I mean, she had dark skin, and we're here, this group from medical school, and all our white coats and everything. So the contrast of how we were all in the room was too much. It was so intense on me, and feeling all of that. And so if telling anyone, you don't have to have any training to deal with it in the moment. It's not like you have to know everything to do, but with anyone at any moment in time, you can approach with love and presence. And so for me to just honor that is just to say, like, thank you for telling me. Thank you for sharing that with me. I don't know what to do right now, but I will find out. And if you would like help, it will help you get help. And now from an integrative perspective, just to add to that, just wondering, like, what does this even have to, what would like stress and trauma even have to do with this woman in the hospital with pneumonia? And she just needs antibiotics. Like, why, what does this even really matter? Like, why are we even interested in this? And why should this even bother us? Well, I just talked to this osteopathic resident the other day on his podcast. And I said, well, imagine the stress and trauma, what that does to the body. It creates tension in the body, creates tension in the fascia, curls things in. It can put pressure on the lymph system. And imagine the grief that you feel from a trauma, and how that might weigh down on your chest, and what that would do with your ability to clear off, say, an infection efficiently. So is it relevant? Absolutely, and always. Can we deal with everything all at once? No, we have to take care of things, what's right in front of us first. Of course, if she had a fever and it was dangerous for her breathing, we need to take care of that first. But there's more healing than just, okay, we'll give her some antibiotics and send her on her way, and let's ask really personal and deep questions and not really care about the response to them. There is so much more that we can do. We have set the bar of medicine really low when we can raise it really high by just shifting our perspective of things. So this story I wrote about in my book, which will be coming out, and it's I Am Intuitive, a multidimensional guide to access your inner light. And my editor's working on it right now, so across my fingers, it'll come out at the end of the year in divine timing. But so I was still in medical school, and then I move on to residency in my pediatric residency in the Bronx. I was terrified to move to the Bronx. I grew up in the suburbs, and the thought of the Bronx was just from movies. So I just got married. At the Bronx, and I'm super stressed because everything, life changes. Now I'm in residency. We're on call every fourth night, which means you stay up all night long, every fourth night. That's insane. Imagine what lack of sleep does on your system. And you're supposed to keep people alive in the hospital. So, no pressure. No, there's lots of pressure. So, starting sometime in medical school onward, like flowing into residency, I started to have like all these reflux symptoms. So it would just be this burning pain. I mean, not a major medical thing, right? But this burning pain, it would keep me up at night. And so I'm up late anyway. Staying up all night. And now I'm not sleeping very well. So at some point in the middle of residency, I just felt like I needed to do something or else I was going to get really sick. And I'm so glad that I listened to some sort of inner guidance in me. And it was like, as I was having that thought, I was walking down the street and I looked up and I saw a yoga sign. And at that point in my life, I was like, oh, okay, I'll try yoga. I hadn't really done it much. I'd maybe done a class or two, but the instructor yelled at us to not sleep. So I was not going to do it again. And so, anyway, I did this yoga. I learned how to slow down, meditate, breathe. And it was really remarkable because after 3 weeks of doing that, my reflux that I'd had for years, starting medical school so like I would say at least 3 years, maybe 4 years or more. And I'd just been given an prescription antacid for it, but I was like, I'm young, I want to be on medication. Um, it went away completely, 100%, and it never returned. And my digestion was so good. And I was thinking, what? This was basically free because I could do this on my own. And I wondered, I was like, huh, why aren't they teaching this to us? And we had done one class on meditation, one in all of medical school. And I remember everyone kind of like laughing about it and falling asleep and just kind of like not really taking it seriously. But I'm like, I felt the physical and emotional effects because I was also much calmer. And one of the attendings in the hospital noticed, and one of the clerks in the emergency room also noticed. He was like, why are you so calm and everyone else is running around with their heads loose? And I could feel the effects. It's like an emergency had been called in. Everyone was like running around, and I was like calmly getting all the syringes prepared and everything for the emergency. And I was like, this is amazing. This is like better than any like prescription anyone could give me because I feel calm. My physical body is better. It's like, we got to teach this stuff. So it was also in residency that I read Dr. Andrew Weil's book, Spontaneous Healing. And in there, it's like, I think it's in chapter 1, he talks about the placebo effect, which I had talked about earlier, first year of medical school. I was so interested in. And I thought, oh, finally, somebody that is talking the same common sense that I have been thinking this whole time. And then I learned the term integrative medicine. And so I started searching for that term. You know, the days of the internet were still early then, but we still could search. And so I found this world of integrative medicine, and I did a rotation in integrative medicine. While I was still in my pediatric residency in the Bronx, I went to some different New York centers, and I learned some other things and mindfulness and incorporating some other practices. Started learning about herbs and stuff, and then I decided to take Dr. Andrew Weil's integrative medicine fellowship in Arizona and learn more about integrative medicine. And that gave me a great foundation for understanding all these different modalities. And what it really helped me do is to expand my therapeutic toolbox tremendously. It's like you never really ran out of options. You just because everything was so wide, the playing field was so big, and so you never felt stuck because there was always something else that you could kind of incorporate, or they had us look at the whole circle of someone's life and see, well, what elements, what aspects could be out of balance and what could we address there. And they practiced it. They walked the talk. That was another thing they really emphasized, was walking the talk. So being able to, you go to conference and you're able to eat healthy. And we would practice just like sitting in meditation or doing some mindfulness things together. We would go out in nature together. So all of these things that we learned were healthy, were being practiced by the physicians, and they were incorporated into the conferences. You may think that's, of course they would do that, but no. There was a McDonald's in the bottom of the hospital that I did my pediatric residency in. And then I remember, I mean, you no, no, it's not true. Just because physicians or medical professionals studied health, they didn't actually always incorporate into their own lives. But from the integrated medicine perspective, the fellowship, they said, well, it's going to make you look like kind of slick if you're giving advice that you're not really following yourself. I mean, it's harder to believe you, and it's harder to give advice because it's like you can kind of tell, it's like you don't really believe it because you're not doing it. You're not incorporating in your own life. So, or there's just a mismatch. So your patients are less likely to believe it too. So anyway, that was really impressed upon me. And from there, I learned with the late Harmon Myers strain, counter strain, which we got to work with our hands. And I loved working with my hands. And I saw how easily certain things could get released in the body with some simple guidance and maneuvers, which we had never touched on in any of my 7 years of medical training thus far. So it was an integrative fellowship that I finally got to that. And then from there, I decided that, well, I knew that cranial osteopathy was really great for pediatrics, for kids, and incorporate, because at that point I was still focused on pediatrics only. And so as soon as I was done with the integrative medicine fellowship, then I went into, started studying with the cranial osteopath. So the Osteopathic Cranial Academy, Southern Cranial Teaching Foundation, and those various groups. And my very first cranial introductory course, I knew as soon as I started to feel those very subtle rhythms in the body, like it brought tears to my eyes, because I felt that my whole entire life had had culminated into this very moment, so that I would be able to feel those things with ease, because I had studied music all growing up and even continued through college. But then I was like, well, I didn't use it professionally, and it's not like I did all these gigs and stuff. And I was like, why did I spend all those years studying music? I knew without a shadow of my doubt, this was what I was meant to do. And this is why I spent decades studying rhythms, because I could feel subtle vibrations easily. And I never forgot it. Once someone showed me something, never forgot it. Because sometimes people said, oh, they're so hard to feel that you'll feel them, and then later on you'll forget how to feel. I was like, I never found that to be true. And it's because of this background that I had, that I felt like really was a calling for me. So with that, it was just like, it completely changed how I was going to practice medicine. And gosh, there's so many more components to this, because it was like maybe right between doing the integrated medicine fellowship and studying with the cranial osteopath. My husband also got really sick. he had a thyroid cancer, which doesn't sound that bad because you can just take it out. But he also had like this parathyroid adenoma, and they were both on the same side. And we went to the best surgeons, the best physicians. We were in the Massachusetts area. So we went to Harvard. I'm from Harvard. I trained at Harvard went to undergrad at Harvard. So I had great respect for Harvard physicians too. And I asked them, is there anything that's relating the two? Because they are literally adjacent to each other. They are in the exact same era. And they said, no, they're completely coincidental. And I was like, really? And I find that so hard to believe. What they could have said was like, yes, they're related because this is one person and one body, and everything in your body is related, but we do not know how. We don't understand how. Not like, nope, totally coincidence. So anyway, that just like shaped also how I looked at things, because I was like, no, there is more to that story and I'm going to figure it out. So it was through cranial osteopathy that I started to feel like how the body was really connected. And if you imagine the body like a balloon, if you were to squeeze one part of that balloon, you would feel it throughout. And so I'll just tell you what I tell my patients when they first come in about the cranial osteopathic treatments, is that I'll check for the alignment of the bones, any tension or kinks in the fascia and the dura that holds everything in place. That tension might put some pressure on the movement of the fluid. So we also check for the movement of fluids, including the arteries that bring nutrients, the veins that remove toxins, the lymph flow that drains inflammation, and the cerebral spinal fluid flow so that the nerves can communicate well. Also check how the organs feel. They need to be in tune and in rhythm with each other to feel balanced and whole. So that's what I'm going to help with you with today. And all of these things I feel in the body also help to guide the direction of like, well, what else do we need to incorporate? Do we need to support certain organs? Or do we need certain kinds of nourishment? Do we need to change the diet in a certain way? Is there inflammation? What's going on? So these things we can feel, and then to support it with labs as we need to. I try to minimize how many labs we get, because if I order too many, I find it's not a sustainable way to practice medicine. We're just spending our resources when we can use them more wisely. And that's true in so many different ways. So this is what it means to be an integrative physician, and to have that expanded toolbox, and to be a cranial osteopath, to integrate those rhythms of the body, of all the different kinds of tissues, of all the organs of the body. And then the other question I get is this: what is this multidimensional component? And it's really about that we are human beings. We are body, mind, and spirit. So you can't ever tease it fully apart. So is it ever just the physical, ever just the emotional, just the mind? No, you're always all of it, because you're a human being. So, and I know sometimes people are wondering like, well, what is this spiritual component? And it's not about religion. It's not anything that I feel is like even scary, because sometimes we start talking about these intangible things, and people can get thrown off by them. But when I think of spirit, I think of love and connection. And that is something that is universal for every single one of us here, every human being. And so all of us are meant to love and be loved. We are meant to be connected with ourselves and each other. And so here is how we integrate and make it a multidimensional perspective on health and healing, body, mind, and spirit. So anyway, I hope that gives you a little bit more perspective on where I'm coming from, and how I got to where I am, and how I might be able to help you, and how just my expanded perspectives might be able to help to expand your own perspectives, just hearing my story. There are so many other little details and components I would love to share with you sometime, and I'm going to share more of those in my book, and so that you will have your guidance too to be able to help yourself. So if you have any questions about anything that I've said, please feel free to ask me. I would love to share with you. And hi, Dr. Gatus. Thank you so much. Yes, the spirit is different and vital approach, helping to heal the spirit. It's really just um, just approaching each person like they are a being, a human being. It feels really good when people talk to you that way, not just a body. And I know that people have had medical experiences where they felt like just a body. And I don't feel like that's really loving and compassionate. So part of it's just being like a kind person. And you could think about it just that way. And that helps to incorporate body, mind, and spirit. So if anyone else has any other comments, questions, please feel free to leave them below, and I would be happy to get back to you. You can always connect with me on Instagram at All Worlds Health, on Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics, and on my website, I send out my e-love letters once a week on Wednesdays, and you can sign up there at allworlds with an S, health.com. That's allworldshealth.com. So lots of love to all of you. I appreciate you being here and listening to my story. And I hope that maybe helped you in some way to understand me. And in understanding me, maybe it helps to understand yourself as well. Because as we connect and understand each other, it's a back and forth, and we learn about ourselves and each other. So I really believe in you, and I hope that you believe in you too. So have a beautiful rest of your week, and I'll see you next week on another episode of the MultiDimensional MD. It's Dr. Arlene Dijamco. Take care. Bye.